Sunshine paints a perfect picture on this sleepy coastal town. Gentle waves kiss the shore, seagulls cry overhead, and families lick dripping ice cream cones as they stroll by. Picture postcard perfect, right? Think again. A dark storm's brewing under this calm sea. A young man, brimming with life and dreams, is about to get slammed. Little does he know, his choices and the people he hangs with are leading him down a one-way street to trouble. Imagine waking up with no clue it could be your last normal day. That's what happens to our main man. One minute he's a regular dude with goals, the next, he's tangled in a mess of lies, greed, and backstabbing that'll mess with him forever. Why would someone betray a friend? How does a simple idea go totally haywire, leaving everyone hurt? And what happens when the truth gets buried for over 10 years? Hey True Crime fam, buckle up because Crimeco is back with another chilling case that'll send shivers down your spine. We all love a good mystery, one that keeps us guessing and peeking over our shoulders. Here at Crimeco, we're all about unraveling those tangled threads, bringing you the stories that haunt our collective memory. So if you're ready for a deep dive into the dark side, hit that subscribe button and smash that like button. It fuels our hunt for the truth. Now grab your favorite beverage, get comfy, and prepare to crack open a case that'll leave you saying, "Wait, what?" All right, detectives, let's get cracking. Picture a charming seaside town nestled on England's southeastern coast, Hastings. Think history buffs rejoice. Ancient castle ruins and the legendary battle that goes by the same name put this place on the map. But this peaceful town was about to be rocked by a mystery that would leave its residents reeling for years. Hastings isn't all history lessons. It's a lively mix of folks who've called it home forever and newcomers seeking a seaside escape. The touristy areas bustle with ice cream shops and arcade games, but wander a bit and you'll find cozy neighborhoods where everyone knows everyone's business, or so they think. Like many beach towns, Hastings has its struggles. Behind the picture-perfect postcard, some areas grapple with unemployment and social issues. It's a place of contrasts, where the seafront's bright lights can't entirely hide darker realities. Enter our main man, Jason Martin Smith. He wasn't a Hastings native. Born in 1972 in bustling London, he had a pretty average life growing up. But in 1999, something drew him to Hastings. Maybe it was the ocean breeze, a fresh start, or just a change of scenery. Whatever the reason, by 1999, he was bouncing between London and this coastal town. Little did he know, this move would set off a chain of events ending in his tragic death. Jason wasn't alone. Hastings had seen an influx of people from bigger cities, all seeking something different. Some were running from the past, some towards a new future. This mix of locals and newcomers added a unique flavor to the town. As Jason settled in, he started making friends. Some were good people just trying to get by. Others, well, let's just say they weren't exactly chore boys. It was through these shady connections that Jason would meet the people who would play a major role in his story. You might be scratching your head, wondering how a regular guy from London ends up in such a dangerous situation. That's life for you. Sometimes small choices lead us down unexpected paths. For Jason, it all started with a simple meeting, a seemingly ordinary kind of deal. Here's the thing about Hastings and maybe small towns in general. The line between everyday life and the criminal underworld can be blurry. People who seem normal might have hidden lives, shady deals, and dangerous connections. Once you step into that world, even a little, getting out can be near impossible. Let's rewind to 1972. Jason Martin Smith was born into a world far from the seaside town that would forever change him. His folks, wanting the best for their kid, raised him in Kingston upon Thames, a bustling London suburb. School days for Jason meant roaming the halls of Hollyfield School in Surbiton. Think typical English school, brick buildings, loud hallways, and classrooms buzzing with dreams for the future. Was Jason a straight-A student or more interested in what was happening outside? We can only guess. But like most kids, he probably had his share of detention slips, crushes, and big plans for when he grew up. Fast forward to 1999. Jason, now a young man in his late 20s, made a move that would change everything. He packed his bags and headed for Hastings. Maybe it was the call of the sea or the itch for a fresh start. Whatever the reason, this move marked a new chapter in his life. He didn't completely ditch his old stomping grounds, though. Jason became a bit of a drifter, splitting his time between the familiar streets of his childhood and the winding lanes of his new seaside home. It was like living in two worlds, the fast-paced energy of London and the laid-back charm of Hastings. So picture Jason. We don't have every detail, but imagine a guy in his late 20s, maybe with a mischievous grin and a twinkle in his eye. He was probably the kind of person who could strike up a conversation with anyone, a skill that would be both a blessing and a curse. In Hastings, Jason started building a new life. He made friends, found his favorite hangouts, and began to feel comfortable in a seaside town. But as he settled in, he also started making some questionable connections. You know how it is in small towns. Everyone's connected, and it doesn't take long to get pulled into different circles. Through these new connections, Jason met a group of guys who would play a major role in his story. Now, these weren't your average pub buddies. These were guys with a reputation, the kind your mom would warn you to stay away from. There was Mark Searle, a key player in this whole thing. Steve Mentnickel was another one to watch. And then there were Frank Torpy and Jimmy Millen. These names might not mean much now, but trust me, they'll come up again. At first, Jason's involvement with these guys seemed harmless enough. Maybe they shared a few drinks, swapped some stories. Nothing too serious. But slowly, things started to shift. Jason found himself getting pulled into their world, a world lurking just beneath the surface of everyday life in Hastings. It all started with what seemed like an easy way to make some quick cash. Who hasn't dreamt of that? But as the saying goes, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. The plan was to rob a pawn shop in Farnborough, Hampshire. Price Attack, that was its name. Now Jason used to work there and had snagged a set of keys on his way out. He figured his role would be simple, hand over the keys, maybe get a small cut for his trouble. But things rarely go according to plan, do they? Before he knew it, Jason was in way deeper than he ever intended to be. The simple key exchange turned into a full-blown robbery, with Jason playing a much bigger part than he'd bargained for. In the end, the gang got away with around £36,000 from the shop. Not a bad haul, something that would have the local cops scratching their heads for weeks. But for Jason, the payout was a joke. All he got for his trouble was a measly £25, barely enough to cover gas. Little did Jason know, this botched robbery was just the beginning. It was the first domino to fall in a series of events that would ultimately lead to his tragic death. As we continue this story, remember, every choice has consequences, and for Jason, those consequences would be deadly. Summer 2001. Things took a sharp turn for Jason. On July 10th, the cops showed up at his girlfriend's place, search warrant in hand. Before he knew it, Jason was being hauled down to the station. At first, he clammed up. He knew the deal, lawyer up, keep your mouth shut. But something shifted between the first and second interview. Maybe the pressure got to him, or maybe he finally realized he was weighed in over his head. Whatever it was, in that second chat with the police, Jason started talking. He spilled the beans on the pawn shop job, naming names and telling them who was involved. Looking back, this was a major turning point. In the world Jason had gotten mixed up in, there's no worse crime than being a snitch. That's British for someone who rats on others. News travels fast in small towns, and it wasn't long before Jason's former crime buddies found out he'd snitched. Suddenly, the guy they saw as an easy mark became a serious threat. Imagine being in Jason's shoes. One minute, you're living your life, thinking you got away with something shady. The next, you're constantly on edge, paranoid that your past is about to catch up with you. Jason started carrying a gun and a chisel for protection. Think about that. A guy so scared he felt the need to be armed just to walk down the street. It's a far cry from the carefree life he probably envisioned when he first moved to the seaside town. August 21st, 2001. Just another ordinary Tuesday in Hastings. But for Jason, it would be his last day. He was hanging out by a friend's place on Wilmington Road when Steve Mentnickel spotted him. Magnicol made a call. Witnesses later said they heard him say, "He's here." What happened next was like a scene straight out of a crime movie. A car screeched to a halt, and before Jason could react, Mark Searle and Jimmy Millen were on him. Despite being armed, Jason didn't stand a chance. They forced him into the car and sped off. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a bystander on Wilmington Road that day. You see a struggle, a guy getting shoved into a car. It happens so fast, you might even question what you just saw. Do you call the police? Try to help? Or mind your own business and walk away? For Jason, that car ride must have felt like an eternity. Did he know where they were taking him? Did he try to reason with them, plead for his life? Or did he just sit there in terrified silence, realizing his worst fears were coming true? The next part of the story comes from witness statements that wouldn't surface for years. The car ended up at a lockup on Battle Road. A lockup, for those unfamiliar, is basically a storage unit you can rent. But on this day, it wasn't being used to store old furniture or holiday decorations. 2 witnesses saw Searle, Millen, and another unidentified man at the lockup. One of them peeked inside and heard a sound that would forever scar him: the sickening thud of an axe against concrete. He saw something on the floor, something that used to be a human being. The other witness noticed blood on Searle's pants. It wasn't hard to guess what had transpired inside that lockup. Later, Millen would brag about what they'd done. He claimed Jason had been shot multiple times, then strangled with some wire. It's the kind of detail that makes your blood run cold, that makes you wonder what kind of people are capable of such brutality. But the horror didn't stop there. According to Millen, they didn't just kill Jason, they tried to erase all traces of him. Millen believed Jason's head had been burned in a garden bin, a bin the police would later search, but find nothing. Just like that, Jason Martin Smith vanished. No body was ever found. It was as if he'd simply disappeared, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a trail of dark rumors. But as we'll see, the truth has a way of coming out, even if it takes a long time. And for the people of Hastings, this was just the beginning of a mystery that would cast a shadow over their town for over a decade. Jason's family and friends hadn't heard from him in weeks. Maybe he was laying low, avoiding trouble. But as days built into weeks, then months, worry turned to dread. Where was Jason? Why wasn't he answering calls? Why hadn't anyone seen him around? The men involved in his disappearance trying to act normal. But keeping a secret that big is tough, especially in a tight-knit town like Hastings, where everyone knows everyone else's business. October 24th, 2001. Just 2 months after Jason vanished, town was rocked again. Jimmy Millen, one of the men connected to Jason, was himself the victim of violence. He was working on his car when motorcycle gunmen roared by, their shots echoing through the neighborhood. Millen crawled to the street, but it was too late. He died in the hospital, leaving behind a wife and kids. The police called it a planned attack, but was it linked to Jason? Whispers and theories crackled through Hastings. By the end of 2001, Hastings was on edge. 2 men vanished under violent circumstances within months. Doors were locked tighter, strangers eyed with suspicion. January 2002 brought a glimmer of hope in Jason's case. New information emerged. Jason had been hurt back in August. A missing persons case turned grim. Police launched dawn raids, arresting Frank Torpy, Mark Searle, and Steve McNichol for their suspected involvement. But getting answers was hard. Searle stayed silent. McNichol claimed they just meant to scare Jason. Millen, who might have known the most, was no longer around. February saw a tip lead police to Kelk Wood. Picture this: officers combing through brush, searching for anything out of place, desperate for a clue. They'd also revisited the lockup where suspicious activity was reported, but despite their efforts, there wasn't enough evidence to hold the suspects. In March, the case against Torpy, Searle, and McNichol was dropped. For Jason's loved ones, it felt like a punch in the gut. They knew something terrible happened, but with no proof, the case went cold. Years passed. Hastings tried to move on, but Jason's unsolved case loomed like a ghost. People still spoke of it in hushed tones, wondering what really happened that August night. Then, in 2014, over a decade later, Sussex police reopened the case. New witnesses emerged, people who had kept quiet for years finally finding their voice. It was a flicker of hope for those who hadn't given up on Jason. One of the original suspects, Frank Torpy, had passed away, but the police wouldn't give up. They were determined to find the truth, no matter how long it took. February 2015, nearly 14 years after Jason vanished, the police made their move. 4 men were arrested in connection with Jason and Jimmy Millen's disappearances. The next day, Mark Searle and Steve McNichol faced serious charges related to Jason. As they stood before the judge in Lewes Crown Court, the people of Hastings held their breath. Would they finally get answers about what happened to Jason Martin Smith all those years ago? The trial at Lewes Crown Court was like slowly piecing together a broken puzzle for the people of Hastings and Jason's family. Each piece revealed a shocking and saddening truth. Mark Searle, now 36, faced the heaviest charges. The court heard how he was deeply involved in what happened to Jason. Steve McNichol, 42 at the time, was also on trial, but it seemed his role was less direct. The story that unfolded was a plan gone terribly wrong. What started as a scare tactic for Jason, for snitching to the police, spiraled out of control. Witnesses described the car ride, the lockup, and the horrific events that followed. On the 14th anniversary of Jason's disappearance, August 21st, 2015, the court delivered its verdict. Mark Searle was found guilty of involvement in Jason's death. He was also convicted of kidnapping and trying to tamper with evidence. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, with a minimum of 29 years before even being considered for parole. Steve McNichol's case took a different turn. The most serious charges against him were dropped at the beginning of the trial. In the end, he was found guilty of being part of the initial plan to kidnap Jason. This earned him a sentence of 4.5 years. The courtroom must have been a whirlwind of emotions as the verdicts were announced. For Jason's family, it was likely bittersweet. They finally had answers and the people responsible were held accountable. But getting Jason back or erasing years of pain and uncertainty was impossible. For Hastings, the trial brought a kind of closure to a dark chapter in their town's history. However, it also forced them to confront some uncomfortable truths about what had been happening right under their noses. Even with the trial over, unanswered questions lingered. Jason's body was never found, despite extensive searches over the years, including a recent week-long dig in woodland near Battle. This meant his family never had a proper goodbye. As we reach the end of this story, let's remember Jason Martin Smith not just as a victim, but as a person. He was a son, a friend, a young man with hopes and dreams that were tragically cut short. His story serves as a stark reminder of life's fragility and the importance of making good choices. The case of Jason Martin Smith is more than just a true crime story. It's a human story about choices, consequences, and the long road to justice. It's a story that will be remembered in Hastings for years to come, a cautionary tale whispered on street corners, a reminder that even in the most ordinary places, extraordinary and tragic events can unfold. All right, guys, before you dash off into the night, don't forget to hit that like button. It lets us know you're digging the content, and that keeps the creepy cases coming your way. While you're at it, smash that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. You don't want to miss our next dive into the mysterious unknown. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you on the flip side for another mind-blowing case. Until then, stay curious.